Hello, everybody, and welcome to yet another episode of Sparks Entertainment and Art, where we are exploring so many interesting facets of the band Sparks. But I think you know pretty much what we're about now, so I'm not going to give a lengthy introduction. I am really thrilled to have with me today Penny Brown, who is someone I have communicated with pretty extensively about the band, and she has some pretty well developed and interesting thoughts, many of which she has put into her blog, and we're going to talk about that today. But first, before I do anything, I want to give Penny a chance to introduce herself. So, Penny, first, I just want to say welcome to the show. It's great to have you.
Hello, Monty. It's a great privilege and great fun to be on this lovely show. Thank you for asking me.
Well, thank you. And let's just dive right into it. Tell us a little bit about how you became when did you hear Sparks? How did you become a fan? How did you become such a deep fan? And how did it lead to what you're doing now with the blog?
Mm. Well, like many people in the UK, my first encounter with Sparks was on the Top of the Pops programme in 1974 when they did This Town Ain't Big Enough for Both of Us. And my daughter, who was 6 then, fell in love with Russell from that moment. And we've both remained fans ever since. We went to see the following year, 1975. We went to see them for the first time at the Palace Theatre in Manchester. And then, sadly, like a lot of my compatriots, I've lost sight of them for many, many years. Life and work got in the way, as well. Affection for David Bowie and other things like that. And it wasn't until the Hello Young Lovers tour rocked up to Salford Quays, the Lowry Theatre in Salford Quays, that we went along to see them there. And I thought, wow, what am I missing all these years? And then subsequently, we tried to get to most of the shows, the Two Hands One Mile shows, the Kimono My House 40 in London.
Wow.
The Revenge of Two Hands as well, so I'd forgotten that one. And I think it was around the time of the FFS shows, I thought, I really want to do something about this band. I want to write something and think more about this band. And I've tried to see all the shows except the 2022 immediately post-COVID shows. I chose not
Yeah.
to go to those. Let me show you something.
Sure.
When we went to the 75 show, my daughter had this big teddy with her, and he went and he swayed and he danced the music, and he still got his 1975 badge.
Oh, that's fantastic. That is a great visual aid. Yeah. But I've been doing a lot of reading recently about the band, and just I think even after all these years, I didn't realize quite how big a phenomenon they were at that time. So
Mm.
it must have been different. I mean, the audience must have been different, or must have seen a lot of folks our age. It must have been just a different kind of experience.
In 2006.
Yeah.
Yeah, and what made me realize that I'd obviously been missing out and had been completely unaware of the 2008 spectacular was that there was a guy sitting in front of me with a T-shirt, and on the back it listed various dates of a tour, which may have been not the 2008. It must have been one of the earlier Pack the Balls tour, maybe, with the dates on. And I thought, well, there have been all these other shows in the UK, and I didn't know about them, including one where they played at the Students' Union at the University of Manchester, where I was working then, and they were like 100 yards, playing 100 yards away from where my office was, and I had no idea.
Wow. That's
Wow.
something. Well, so let's talk about that. I do want to talk about the blog because it is so unique, but you were at University of Manchester, and
Yes.
talk just for a minute about that and how that made you how that influenced the approach you took when you started up this effort.
Okay. Well, I'm retired now, but I was a lecturer in language and literature at
Hmm.
the University of Manchester for many, many years. And I think it was teaching literature, so studying novels, plays in particular, teaching them and researching and writing them kind of informed my desire to write something about Sparks music, but also about the phenomenon of Sparks and about the tours, for example. Now, in my research, I've always tried to do things that are a bit different and things that will tell the readers something perhaps they didn't know before. And I noticed that nearly all the books and things I'd seen on Sparks were all about the UK, Sparks in the UK, or Sparks in the States. And I thought they mentioned the fact that they played in Paris, they played in all over Europe, but there was very little information about that. So I thought, right, I'll put my languages to work and research what happened in France. That was the first thing I did. And there's a lot of information there, a lot of stuff, not just tours, but other visits to France and what the things that they'd said about France and songs in French and so on. And that one, I was lucky enough to have that published in the official newsletter. And so that kind of spurred me on. So then I went on to look at other countries, Belgium and
Finland, certainly.
Finland and Germany, Sweden, of course, just to try and fill in the gaps, because I thought people might like to know about their connection there. There's so much about the Sparks in the UK, but there's not much about, where they went in Sweden or Finland and what they whether they performed the same things, how it went down. I was able to try and track down reviews, those that I could read in the original, not all of them, obviously, just to see if I could bring some new information to it.
Yeah.
And I published some of those on the fan sites, and I've forgotten now who, but somebody said to me, why don't you do a blog, put them all on a blog? So I had to find out how to do a blog.
My guess is that it was Ron Mail's lyrics that had a special appeal to you.
Absolutely. I've always loved songs that reference other aspects of arts or literature or theatre or geography or whatever. And I was thinking about what Ron said about Cole Porter. One of my favourite songs when I was younger was You're the Tops, where here's You're the Tops, and they reference the Mona Lisa, the Louvre, Shakespeare sonnets, your Mickey Mouse, all those lines. I thought all those things, they're also there in Sparks. So I've always liked songs like that. And so I like the way that in some of their songs, their Sparks do that kind of thing, reference.
I think Cole Porter they've called Cole Porter out as an influence.
I'm sure it must have been, yeah.
Yeah. But so let's draw on that a little bit. He does make a lot of cultural references throughout his songs, and that seems to be kind of a trademark almost. And if you go back and listen to the older, you'll hear quite a bit of it. And was that what it was, or was it also the way he structures the songs and the lyrics and the thoughts that go behind the songs?
All of those things, obviously. I love, the cultural references and the jokes. We've said that. I've learned a lot through following these references. I mean, for example, in Rosebud, I had no idea what that was about.
Really?
Until I saw a reference to Citizen Kane. So I went, what's Citizen Kane? And then I got the point and I could see Rosebud in a different way. I've tried to follow the films sometimes that they talk about, mainly not so much in their music, obviously, but in interviews and so on, or other references, finding out about Veronica Lake, for example. You can learn a lot, but also I think it's the language. I've written a few things, probably quite boring, I don't know, to people about the way they use language. Different registers of speech, unexpected words like the barometric pressure is irrelevant to me. How many songs are you going to find a line like that in? Let's face it.
One.
The way they balance sort of very elegant words with slang words. I just trying to think of a good example of that. In
Suburban Homeboy is what comes to mind immediately.
Yes, indeed, yes. Yeah. Or Piss Off, where they say there's those balances of it's irrefutable, and then it goes piss off. So you've got sort of direct conflict of the two registers of levels of speech. I love the way all the songs are little mini dramas. I mean, it's a lot of people comment on that, obviously, and the fact they've got so many different layers of meaning. You can find so many things. And as we've seen in discussions that you've had with people, and we have on various fan sites, that people find all sorts of meanings which come perhaps from their personal views, or maybe a link to something else they've read. I like the way they challenge us. They challenge us to go and find out what things are about. The humor, obviously, the humor I think is just amazing. And the emotion. And I love the songs that he writes about being inarticulate, or misunderstanding the speech, while at the same time, using very clear and very precise
Yeah,
language,
he
very
comes
articulate
back to that quite a
language.
bit, doesn't he?
Mm.
Yeah. Well, one of you said everything you said is fascinating. One of the things that motivates this show is the way different people see the band.
Mm.
And that's what I love. And that's what I love hearing from your perspective. The words and his wordplay are really unique. I don't know anybody else who does what he does.
Mm.
And I think you've talked about that and other things in your blog. So I want to turn to the blog a little bit. I realize I was remiss in my introduction where I didn't say the name of the blog, which is Sparks Talk by Penny.
As all one word, yes.
All one
Of
word
course.
at sparkstalkbypenny.blogspot.com. It'll be down there. Everybody will be able to get a link to it. And so you talked about how you decided to start the blog, and you talked about some of the pieces on there. But there's kind of a nice variety, and you really bring your background to it in your writing. And I wonder if you have any thoughts about why you chose this topic, to really delve in like that.
Well, if I could choose an example, this one I did on Shakespeare and Sparks,
Hmm.
which I said, what a fantastic collaboration that would be. Um, I was very interested when I saw the song that they wrote for Christy Hayden, Othello. And I was struck by the fact that this was a song rare, I think, in Sparks Words, which is sung from a female perspective. And lots of the songs you could take as being sung from a female perspective, but that one specifically, from the viewpoint of Desdemona. And then I thought, well, there's a lot of Shakespeare references, and Shakespeare is one of my interests. I've never taught or worked on Shakespeare, but it is one of my interests. So I thought, well, I'll just have a look around and see what other references there are to Shakespeare and Shakespeare's plays, and then found quite a few. And of course, there was Life with the Macbeths,
Of
which
course.
was fantastic. I mean, I'm hoping that was a response to the 2016 400 years anniversary since Shakespeare's death. I did write to Ron and say, it's the 400th anniversary, don't you?
Did
But
you
I
write
wouldn't.
back?
No, 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 no. I'm not
You'll
vain
have to
enough
tell
to.
me how to reach him.
No,
Do
I
you
sent
think?
it via the management, but I'm not vain enough to think that he was responding to that. But I'm sure they were aware it was the 400th anniversary anyway, and of course it's wonderful. It's one of my favourites is the Life of the Macbeths.
Yeah.
And then, do you want me to say something about the Annette link?
I would love to hear your thoughts about Annette, and also, that's where you really did talk about Shakespeare quite a bit. There were many aspects with Othello that you talked
Yeah.
about.
Mm.
Um, even I think you said even if it's not a deliberate aim, but that's what you saw in it. But why don't you talk about it? You can talk about it better than I can.
Okay. Well, it's having seen, I say, the song called Othello, and then when I saw Annette, I thought, oh, yeah, it's about jealousy and so on. And I thought, no, hang on a minute. They mentioned Othello. I wonder if there's a link. So went away and read Othello again, and then I saw all these sort of possible comparisons. Now, I taught comparative literature, and you've got to be very careful in comparative literature because you can compare anything with anything if you try hard enough. And it's not necessarily valid, right?
We're aware of that. Yes.
Which is why I put in that rider about this isn't necessarily what they meant, what they had in mind, but it's simply what I found in it of interest to me. And it's about jealousy. It's about sort of toxic male ego. It's about violence. It's about the breakdown in relationships, and both things are kind of there. And I thought that there were some aspects in Annette, particularly right at the end, that echo in the Sympathy for the Abyss, that kind of echoes the idea in the play Othello, that how jealousy sort of makes him mad and loses all reason. And simply acts on that emotion. So I thought it was worth just trying to explore that a bit. But as I say, I wouldn't know at all, obviously, whether that's what they had in mind. But it was just a way of looking at the film that interested me.
Well, can you draw that out a little bit more? I mean, I think it's a fascinating thought, and I see it. I see it. Your writing is very compelling.
And this is where I'll have to look at my notes to remind myself what I wrote about that. Yeah. The one thing that is different between Annette and Othello is that you haven't got the sort of the wicked villain, the Iago figure that stokes the jealousy of Othello, unless in the film in Annette you've got the role of the press and the public, who
Mhm.
go on and on about the relationship and sort of the intrusiveness into the relationship. May fulfill that role, I don't know, but I think that the idea of the relationship between two people who might seem to be complete opposites or very different in different ways, is rather like Othello, that everybody thinks, what on earth does Desdemona, this beautiful young woman, see in this older soldier who is referred to as, of course, Othello the Moor, of course. Whereas in Annette, it's more of the professional difference. It's the high culture, arguably sort of high culture, low culture. I don't know, clash. But I think that's where the jealousy is different there, because it's more professional jealousy. I think Henry McHenry is
Yeah.
jealous of her success as an opera singer, but they're kind of apparently in the public eye mismatched couple. That's the key, I think, to
Mm.
the
But there's
comparison.
definitely an analogy. And where do you see the role of the conductor fitting in to this particular analysis?
Well, in Othello, there is a guy called Cassio who also loves Desdemona. He's the other possible suitor, but nothing comes of that. But Othello is led to believe that his wife has been unfaithful with this Cassio. And in Annette, there is this obviously a relationship between the conductor and Anne. Um, there's a suggestion that I think there's a suggestion that he might even have been Annette's father. And it's partly jealousy of him that Henry makes him kill him. I
Hmm.
think that's the connection. The other possible suitor,
Yeah, I
Anne.
think it's really great food for thought, and you bring it out so well. And I want to shift just a little bit. One of the things that I want to do on this show are deep dives into specific albums. And
Mm.
I mentioned we did that with Latte. And I want to invite you back to really do a deep dive at the appropriate time into the seduction of Ingmar Bergman.
Mm.
I think people should know that you have a piece there that is really very scholarly. I think you have 50 footnotes there. You really draw out some amazing themes, and you characterize it as like a dark hero's tale,
Mm.
and you really carry that through right from the beginning to the final episode of the, as you called it in the essay. And what led you to do such a, we'll talk about it in detail another time, but what led you to really dive down and do that kind of hardcore analysis for that particular album?
Well, that's an example of something that certainly grew out of my previous work and career, in that I taught for a long time courses that for younger readers, or courses sort of related to popular culture, and the adventure story, kind of Jules Verne adventure stories, which follow a sort of pattern which has been very carefully sort of identified by others, by scholars in the past, of a sort of format of the hero adventure story that goes right back to the Odyssey, where and you can apply it to something like Harry Potter, where you have someone who is sent out or goes out sometimes on their own volition, on a quest, or maybe is sort of thrown out into the world, meets lots of monsters, temptations, dangers, and things like that, and then returns triumphant at the end. And that is an age-old pattern.
Right.
And I found a book about how that excuse me, how that pattern is much used in Hollywood movies. Things like The Lion King, for example, was one that's quoted. And so I suppose things like the Indiana Jones. Yeah, I'm not quite sure about that, but it's certainly that a similar sort of model. And when I first heard the Seduction of Ingabone, I thought, wow, that kind of conforms to that pattern, which is why excuse me, why that ended up having 50 odd footnotes, because I had to kind of establish, it was a theory that I had, and I like theories to have some kind of basis in fact that you can sort of back up the theory. And this was trying to show how the different stages of Bergman do fit that model, which has been so successful since Homer's days, right the way through to books like the Harry Potter books, and Hollywood movies and so on.
Well,
Excuse my really
it's
good voice.
certainly publication worthy, to say the least. It's a beautiful piece, and we will come
It
back
was
to it.
written,
But I'm
sorry,
sorry.
can I just say it was two things. It was written initially, not sort of just for publishing for Sparks fans, but I was intending to try and submit it to some kind of comparative journal. But afterwards, I didn't do it. I just wrote it and left it. That's why it's got all the footnotes. But the second thing is, I did ask the Sparks management if they would send that to Ron with some questions. And he very kindly replied to me
He
with the
did.
answers to some of those questions. And he said there that he loved the idea. And he said, although it may not have been in our minds at the time, that may not have been the approach that we had in our minds at the time, but it's great that you can find that in it.
Wow.
And I've always had that reply from him, in my mind.
I don't want to give people the impression that you're some deep scholar who only thinks, very seriously about this, because you obviously really appreciate the fun and
Yeah,
the jokes
sure.
in the music and how much they bring to it from that perspective. And that gets me to, if I could just pivot a little bit, something you and I have also talked about is how they present themselves. And that seems to be part of the story, as they
Mm.
do these albums, there's an interesting aspect to how they present themselves on stage and musically. And I wonder if you have any thoughts about that.
But going back to the beginning again, that Top of the Pops performance, which has always been quoted as having such an impact
Yeah,
on people, I'm interested in the way that image has kind of evolved, mainly from the point of view of Ron and his expressions, because whereas he used to scowl at the audience, people call it the death scare and death stare and so on. I don't know how do you quite read it that way, but the sort of scowling at people. But I'm interested in the way his expressions at Russell while Russell is performing and how that's evolved, because if you look at some of the 80s videos, particularly, he moves from diffidence to surprise to alarm, sort of disapproving, even, while
very
Russell is sort of
definitely. Yeah.
shaking things at him, and I think that's in one or two cases it's almost upstaging. And somebody posted a video recently of something from the age. Did you see it where the audience on Ron's side were watching him all the time and laughing and nudging
I
and he
didn't
was
see
sort of
that.
mugging at the audience and looking at scowling at Russell, and Russell's working away, in front of him, but everybody was watching Ron. But I mean, I know that that's been modified a lot lately. You don't get that so much, if at all, in concerts today. I mean, you do see him maybe frowning or looking at the audience, but you don't. It's not so, certainly with relation with Russell, it's not so extreme. There's a bit of teasing going on, but you also got the sort of obvious mutual affection and admiration there all the time.
Clearly.
So,
The way I see it is that it's evolved to a very, yeah, as he's older now and he's not going to do it
yeah.
because, he knows
Mm.
that that's kind of a silly thing to be doing. But he's taken on a certain stoicness. He's going to sit
Mm.
there and he's going to be stoic. He doesn't do a lot of drama. He's stoic. And then he comes out and does his dance. And then he goes
Yeah.
back to that stoic pause. And in the FFS tour, there was a point, I can't remember what song it was, where he didn't play the keyboard and he went off to the side and he just stood there holding that stoic look the whole time.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. It's almost as though he's moved from the slightly disapproving, puzzled older brother to sort of the elder statesman who sort of, or puppet master maybe. It's his songs the main part. Um, yeah, watching yes, watching. Stoic's a good word for it. Yeah, it's
Yeah. Yeah.
watching.
That's always been a question with them is how much is a put on and how much is just them being them. And
Mm.
it seems to me there's elements of both. But I mean, they
Yeah.
clearly were making conscious decisions back in the old
Yes.
days to create that contrast.
Yes.
I mean, just by
Indeed.
cutting
Yes.
his hair the way he did in such a
Yes.
non-rock star way was
Yeah.
clearly creating a contrast. And they wanted that. And they were always the two that were out front
Yes.
and they got the
Yeah.
attention and you saw that contrast.
That's right. And some of the little sketches that Ron did, sort of, well, certainly at the time of the ball in 2000, I think he was still doing them with the Wonder Dog and the Baby Leroy and things like that. He doesn't do those anymore,
Doesn't
but
do them.
you've still got the expectations of the dance. I think if he never did the dance, there'd probably be a riot.
I think, I don't know how much they're going to continue to do this, but at some point you got to say he's getting a little up there to be doing the dance. But
Well,
that's up to him. That's up to
I,
him.
I worry about the knees of both of them, when they're,
Yeah.
particularly every time
Yeah.
Russell jumps in the air, I think, mind your knees.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I didn't really, the baby Leroy stuff was okay, but I would love to see him come out and do It's a Sparks show tonight before the shows.
Yeah.
That they could still do.
Mm. That
I
they
love,
can still do, yes.
yeah, I
Yeah,
love that. I
yeah.
love that.
But yes, the Sparks show, that would be fantastic.
Yeah. Yeah. So, well, speaking of fantastic, you are fantastic. This has been a great talk. I really appreciate it. When you think about what we talked about and Sparks in general, what's the big message you want people to walk away from this conversation?
That Sparks must surely be the most rewarding and amazing and fantastic band that they've been for decades and decades, and the fact that they're still doing it and bring out new stuff and stuff which is highly rated and knocks spots off a lot of other contemporary music today as then. I think that if people don't know them very well, they've got to discover them and look back and explore it all. So I think they're
No.
beyond
Well,
compare.
I couldn't say it. I couldn't say it better. I couldn't even try to. I agree completely. The only thing I'd add is that they're still doing it at such a high level.
Yes, yes.
That's, that's to me is something else that I'd add to what you said.
And new stuff and producing new stuff, not just relying on the old greatest hits.
No, no, they leave
That's
out some big hits every time they play.
mm,
So, and add some very obscure songs sometimes.
and they bring out feelings and ideas and thoughts, because they touch so much on uh, feelings, insecurities. Most people have felt at some time in their lives, and with just little tiny stories, they key into those things and bring out those sort of reactions. I think it's
Yep.
wonderful.
Just throw a little humor in to make it kind of
Yeah,
easier to take.
absolutely. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Well, Penny, this has been an absolute pleasure. And thank you so much for being on the show with me today.
Pleasure was mine. Thank you very much for having me.
Absolutely. And I'm going to talk to my audience once again, always asking you to subscribe. That helps with the YouTube algorithms. But it's also, as I said before, it's also because you get conversations like this one. And that's really what it's all about. To hear from people like Penny and so many of the other folks that have so much to say and such a wonderful perspective. This is new. This is different. And I want you to be part of the community. So thank you again, Penny. Thank you, everybody, for watching. And this is Monty signing out.